Hello, and welcome to the Logistics Management Podcast Series. My name's Jeff Berman. I'm Group News Editor for Logistics Management Magazine and the Peerless Media Supply Chain Group. Today, it's a real pleasure to welcome back Ian Jefferies to our podcast. Ian serves as the President and CEO of the Washington, D.C. based Association of American Railroads, also commonly known simply as the AAR. Ian started in his role leading the AAR in January 2019, and prior to that, he served as the senior vice president of AAR's government affairs, overseeing the development, promotion, and implementation of legislative priorities for the AAR. And prior to joining AAR, he served as a senior policy advisor to the chairman of the U.S. Senate Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation from 2009 to 2013. Ian, welcome back.
Thanks for having me. Great to be back on.
Yeah, absolutely. As we were saying in our pre-call, I think this is at least the fifth or sixth time we had you. So I think you currently have the crown for most appearances. Probably closely behind you are John Gold at the NRF and our good mutual friend Tony Hatch. So, uh,
Well,
you,
I'm honored to be in such esteemed company.
exactly, exactly. So let's hit the ground running here, Ian. A lot of things going on in the industry. Um, To begin, how would you sort of describe the overall state of the freight rail industry as we enter 2025? Basically, Ian, as you see it, what are the biggest opportunities and challenges at the moment?
Yeah, great question. Big question. And I've thought about this a lot. And I think if I was to boil all of that down into one word, I think I would probably use the word momentum. I feel like the industry's got a lot going for it right now, and is moving in a very productive, positive direction. So, what do I mean by that? You've got, volumes are, of course, everybody always wants additional volumes, additional freight, and we'll talk about that some. But volumes have remained reasonably steady year over year. I think we ended 2024, maybe net 3% above 23, really led by a pretty big increase in intermodal. Saw a bit of an offset on carloads, but that was largely dragged down by coal. Several commodities actually did fairly well. Service has been in a pretty solid spot for an extended period of time, something our members worked really hard on coming out of some of the supply chain challenges in 21, 22. And so we're going to look to continue to further improve that. Investment remains very strong. CapEx hanging in there, and maintenance combined hanging in there, 23, 24 billion in private dollars annually, something we continue to be proud of every year. The safety numbers were very strong in 2024. Of course, we're always striving for zero incidents, but I think by the time the year's over, at least we've got data through the first 10 months of 2024 and a
Yeah.
lot of further decrease in derailments over 23, further reduction in employee injuries. So momentum on that front, and really now coming into what we hope will be an opportunity to do some regulatory modernization with the new administration, and hopefully the economy can hang in there and maybe get churning up a little more, and our folks are locked and loaded, ready to take on additional freight.
Okay, that's terrific. Um, so shifting to more of on the economic side, Ian, how do you think freight rail is positioned in the current economic climate? In other words, are there any particular sectors, and I'm thinking along the lines of intermodal, bulk commodities, or consumer goods, for example, that are seeing shifts in volume?
Yeah. So, Jeff, you've been around a while and you know our industry pretty well. And we kind of, the old saying, we go as the economy goes. So that's always kind of a fundamental. So we want to see, solid economic growth. We want to see a globally competitive environment. We want to see raw materials demand strong, because we move so much of that. We want to see strong ag markets. And so I think we're positioned pretty well across the economy. You mentioned intermodal, and as I said, I believe we finished 24 6% above 23 year over year. Now some of those comps may have been a little easier where based on where we were in 23, but um, already year to date, 25 versus 24, intermodal's up 11.4%. So the trend is continuing in a positive way. And especially on the West Coast, you saw, dramatic increases, handled very well with a high level of service from our Western members, and then bringing that into the middle of the country, and in some cases connecting with our Eastern folks as well. And I think there's a real opportunity to continue to not only take advantage of the surge in containers moving writ large, but to really pull a lot of that off the highways. And that's not something that's new for you to hear, but I think part of the reason we've got a reinvigorated view on that is we have seen a number of new product lines come on board from our members that offer, truck-like service, premium service, extremely high level of on-time performance at a very competitive rate. And I think there are a lot of logistics companies, trucking companies out there. If they have the opportunity, they're gonna put that container on rail for the long haul of the trip. And so the more attractive we can make that, and the more we can demonstrate that this is not a flash in the pan, this is the norm, which we are doing, then that's just gonna, success is gonna beget success. So of course we want to see the economy do well. I think everyone wants to see rates and inflation at a low level. So hopefully we can see a little more improvement there. And economic growth is what it's all about. So maybe continuing what is a competitive tax environment here before the end of the year via Congress will help that. And like I said, an opportunity to maybe loosen the reins of some of the regulatory strangles that we felt can provide a little more opportunity as well. So I think we're positioned well and ready to ride the economy forward.
Okay, that's terrific. And then when we focus along the lines of supply chain resilience here, given the lessons of the past few years, Ian, how has the rail industry adapted to improve supply chain reliability and also efficiency?
Great question, and you hit the nail on the head. There are definitely some lessons learned over a few years ago, really, and that's a couple different things. One, it's improving communication across the entire supply chain. So we're a key cog in that, but we're partners, as you know, with other pieces of the supply chain. So improving and increasing information flow, visibility allows for a smoother transition of product throughout the chain. Several of our CEOs have talked about the need to maintain an appropriate buffer of both equipment and employees, so you're prepared for surges, and when you see those coming, you've got the right folks in place. At the same time, operating at a highly productive, efficient level. And so you've seen steps taken there to really make sure that we're buttressed if there is a surge that may not be in the forecast, so to speak. And again, I think the results are clear. Service has been at a significantly higher level for a sustained period of time. We always want to get better. But as I mentioned, we saw record volumes coming onto the rails out of the West Coast ports at periods over the past year, and it was handled at a really high level of efficiency, high level of service, and giving the customers what they should expect.
Yeah, no, but that makes a lot of sense. And let's shift gears over to the policy and regulatory landscape, Ian. With the new Congress and administration settling in here, what policy or regulatory issues do you think are top of mind for the rail sector? And I guess as a follow-up, are you seeing momentum towards regulatory balance, or are there concerns about potential new restrictions?
Um, So I would kind of break that down into a couple different pieces. So we'll
Sure.
start on the kind of the administration agency side, and as and I think a lot of your listeners know, we have two primary regulators. We've got our operational slash safety regulator, the Federal Rail Administration, and then we've got our economic regulator, the Surface Transportation Board. And at the FRA in particular, we think we see a lot of opportunities to to really, like I said, I like to use the term modernize regulations. We've got, as literally 200 years of regulations on the books.
Mm-hmm.
And we have regulations that have been in place for 50 years, and there's a very manual paradigm in the regulations for inspections, et cetera. And we believe there's a real opportunity to allow for innovation and technological development and deployment that will advance safety in a very data-driven way. And we think there's an opportunity with this administration to pull forward and allow newer technologies, different track inspection tools, wayside detection, onboard detection tools that have demonstrated they will result in a higher level of safety to be the new way of doing things to meet a regulatory requirement. And I think there'll be an openness there. And we always say follow the data. And so we're excited about that opportunity. I would say on the STB side that there are real opportunities to one, and this is more of a kind of a agency operations side to really improve the efficiency of how the agency operates. Anyone who's dealt with the SDB historically knows that it is just an excruciatingly long process to get a decision out of that board, regardless of what side of the argument you might be on. And I think there's a real opportunity to increase efficiency at the board, to increase some discipline, to 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 make decisions for stakeholders in a quicker way. I also think there are opportunities to take on some bigger, broader issues. The SDB has a really strong preemption authority, and historically, I think has been a little hesitant to flex that muscle. And I think there's an opportunity there for the SDB to really demonstrate that it is actually the key authority on interstate rail matters writ large. And, we ran into issues and have continued to run into issues, for example, with California Air Resources Board's efforts to
Mm-hmm.
regulate locomotives. And well, the SDB did step up and weighed in with the EPA and said, look, this is really in our jurisdiction, and any issue related to this needs to be handled by the SDB. And so there's kind of I would say, hopefully a preview of a willingness to be a little more assertive, and we think that would be really valuable. And of course, there are a number of other things. On the congressional side, I think you're going to see, out of the gate, Congress has got a lot on its plate. There's an effort to do significant work on border security. We've got to fund the government. In March, there's a debt ceiling increase that's going to have to be negotiated. There's, obviously we're all aware of some of the horrible tragedies and disasters, natural disasters that have occurred around the country
Yes.
in recent months, and Congress is going to have to figure out a way to provide some funding to those affected areas. And then, of course, hanging out at the end of the year is a need to do something on taxes, the 2017 tax bill, because absent action, that would result in the largest increase in American history. And I can tell you with certainty that Republicans certainly aren't going to allow that to happen on their watch. So I think there's, my point being, there's some really heavy lifts that need to be done. But at the same time, as we sit here in the transportation industry, we'll be active on cross-border stuff. We'll be very active on the tax discussion. But kind of around the bend, in 2026, we have the need to reauthorize all the surface transportation programs. So the infrastructure bill from 2021 will expire, and that'll need to be addressed. And I think that's where you're going to see a lot of the nitty-gritty discussions about rail policy, transportation policy, funding, what have you. So we're laying the groundwork for that now. I just had the opportunity to testify in the House in mid-January. So those discussions have already begun, laying out priorities and laying out kind of table stakes for what we think makes sense. And we'll continue to really work that throughout this year and into next.
Yeah, that's a great segue actually in regards to the infrastructure bill, Ian. And I know the previous one did make some significant investments in rail. What do you think in terms of the progress that has been made, and what additional infrastructure priorities would you like to see addressed in future policy efforts? So I guess maybe in other words, perhaps give us an overview of what you talked about in front of the committee a few weeks back.
Well, so I think you talked about funding, so let's take that one on first.
Okay.
Um, So on the funding side, as we're very, and I mentioned this earlier, we're very proud of the fact that we're almost entirely privately maintained and invest our own dollars. We used to have this tagline, "We invest so taxpayers don't have to," and that's never been more true to this day. So we're
Yeah.
very fortunate that we don't have to go to Capitol Hill, asking for money to maintain and invest into our infrastructure. At the same time, as you referenced, there are some programs that our public partners can take advantage of on rail projects of shared interest. So, we talk about the CREATE program in Chicago, for example, that is a partnership of not only the freight railroads, but Metra, Amtrak, the city of Chicago, Cook County, the state of Illinois. And so our public partners will often seek funds, various different grant programs, to partner with our private dollars to work on kind of massive infrastructure projects that have a benefit to the traveling, to the public, and the freight side and the passenger rail side. And so, for example, there was a new grade separation program that was stood up in the IIJA, and I think it was $600 million a year over the life of the bill of 5 years. So $3 billion to help fund grade separations. And as you know, as somebody who studies rail, grade crossings are probably one of the more challenging safety issues we deal with via grade crossing collisions, and also can be have a significant impact on communities and the traveling public if they're blocked. So separating a grade crossing can have an enormous benefit both on the safety side, the freight efficiency side, and the public impact side. So that's a program we were big champions of, and we'll continue to support that next time around. I think there's pretty strong bipartisan support there. So my belief is that that program will be around for another 5 years or however long the next bill is.
Okay.
And there are several other programs like that. And there'll be a lot of discussion about funding, but I think there's a lot of bipartisan support for kind of those public-private programs. Now, I also talked about kind of the other side of funding, which is the Highway Trust Fund, which of course funds, the infrastructure for our biggest partners and also our biggest competitors, being our trucking friends.
Sure.
And that program's an absolute disaster because it's already received, I don't know, well over $100 billion in general transfer funds for a
Yeah.
program that's supposed to be self-sustaining. Absent any action, I think it's going to require another $200 billion. And so you think about that, that is money that the users of that system don't have to pay themselves. There's a massive, massive public subsidy, and frankly, a massive competitive imbalancer when it comes to the infrastructure our competitors operate on and the infrastructure we operate on. So we will shout it from the mountaintops until we lose our voices that this program's got to be fixed. We think a VMT with a weight component is the most equitable way forward. You've got a lot
Hmm.
of pilots out there. That's a big shift, obviously, but we'll keep talking about that. And look, I'll give my friends over at the ATA, the American Trucking Association's credit. They've said, look, we believe we need to be paying more into this. And so, we have different ways of achieving that. They'd said that, they'd be willing to increase the gas tax. But I think there's a general recognition that the program needs to be really rejiggered to be at least start sniffing towards sustaining itself. So, we'll keep talking about that. And then on the policy side for us, it kind of parallels what I talked about on the regulatory side. We think Congress can play a productive role in creating and requiring a regulatory environment that promotes innovation, promotes pilot programs, promotes waivers to allow for development, deployment of new technologies appropriate test beds to build sound data sets that can be evaluated to determine if, the new way of doing things should be allowed under an existing regulation. So Congress can provide some structure and encouragement around that as well. So that's just kind of in a nutshell, kind of the tip of the spear for some of the things we're going to be talking about over the next year.
Absolutely. Yeah. And your comments about the Highway Trust Fund certainly resonate. As someone who's been covering this industry for about 20 years, a lot of the same things or solutions being floated, like the vehicle miles tax or VMT, and the numerous transfers from the general fund. So it'd be nice to see some meaningful movement on that. So in the time we have left, Ian, let's hit on a few other quick things. One being energy and sustainability. As is commonly known, freight rail is viewed as the most fuel efficient way to move goods over land. That said, how is the industry positioning itself in discussions around emissions regulations and also environmental policy in 2025?
Yeah, great question and a really timely question. So I would just say this: no matter what side of the argument you are on with regard to emissions regulation, et cetera, I can tell you that you should agree that it makes sense for railroads to reduce their reliance on diesel fuel. And why is that? It's because diesel is our second largest expense as an industry. So
Sure.
reducing our reliance on diesel, there's a sound business case there. And I like to say, we have a quarter of the emissions that the trucks do on the highway. So if you want to reduce emissions today, let's get more containers on rail. And obviously that has a number of other extraneous positive effects, reducing congestion, reducing wear and tear on infrastructure, et cetera. And so we're proud of our environmental performance today. As I said, there's a business case and an environmental case to further improve our environmental performance or reduce the amount of emissions or particulates we put into the atmosphere.
Okay.
And so what we don't like, though, is, for example, what we saw in California, where a state effectively tried to nationally mandate a requirement that, we move to zero emissions locomotives on a timeline that was wholly unrealistic and
Hmm.
required a product that does not exist in the market and won't for several years. So, that missed the marker in a major way. But railroads are exploring and working on a variety of technologies, whether it's battery electric, increased use of renewables, hydrogen power. There's a lot of opportunities out there, and I think our pitch is, look, we're part of the solution. Two, we're going to continue to drive improvement in this area. Three, don't lock us in one path. Let us continue to work in the lab to figure out what the best ways are long term to make additional progress.
Okay, great. And final question here, Ian, as we're wrapping up, what should industry stakeholders be watching for in the coming months? Basically, what are the key milestones or developments you anticipate for freight rail in 2025?
Right. So whether it's in Washington, where obviously I sit and represent the industry, I think a couple of different inflection points. We're going to be watching trade and tariffs very closely, and making sure we're engaged in those discussions as necessary. We are going to be an active player on the tax side of things to ensure that we have a competitive tax code for our members to continue to thrive and be able to make the investments they need. So ensuring bonus depreciation, ensuring that the corporate tax rate at least stays put where it is, some other measures. We're going to be focused very much on the regulatory side, as I said, to modernize some ways we might be able to do things in the regulations to further advance safety. And then kind of out in the industry, I think, we're looking at larger macroeconomic indicators. We'll see where the Fed goes. We'll
Uh-huh.
see where inflation goes. But in the meantime, we're going to stick to our knitting and continue to provide good service, continue to drive safety improvements, offer products that our members, excuse me, our customers are enticed to use, and look to grow volumes across the board and take advantage and win the jump ball traffic out there.
Okay, that's a great wrap up. That's a great summary. So listen, Ian, on behalf of Logistics Management Magazine and the Peerless Media Supply Chain Group, I'd like just to say thanks once again for spending some time with us and helping the audience get up to date on all things freight rail.
No, thank you. And I think we need like a five timers club jacket or something. So
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'll work on that. We'll get to work on that. That's a great idea. And for those of you in the audience, please go ahead and check out the Association of American Railroads. They have a Twitter handle. It's simply at AAR_freight rail. And Ian is on LinkedIn. You can find him there. LinkedIn.com/IN/Ian Jefferies / that's Jefferies. And please also give us a follow on Twitter. That is simply at logisticsmgmt. And also please sign up for our podcast wherever you get your podcasts. If you are not already doing so, just simply go ahead and look for Supply Chain 24/7. Thanks everybody and have a great day. We'll see you next time.